No nanny could handle the triplets until the new cleaner surprised them. Richard Parker stared at the phone in disbelief. It was the 12th time in 5 months that a nanny had called to quit. 3 days. The woman had lasted only 3 days. He let his cell phone drop onto the couch and ran his hands over his face, feeling the accumulated exhaustion from so many sleepless nights. That's when he heard the noise coming from the kitchen. Glass breaking. Again. "No, no, no," he murmured, quickly getting up. When he reached the kitchen, he found the 3 boys in the middle of the shards of a jar that once held cookies. Michael had chocolate smeared around his mouth, while David and Luke laughed, jumping over the pieces of glass with their bare feet. "Get out of there now," Richard shouted louder than he intended. The boys stopped for a second, looked at their father, and continued exactly as they were, as if he hadn't said anything, as if he were invisible in his own home. Richard felt something break inside him. It wasn't anger. It was despair, really. An urge to sit on the floor and cry until he had no tears left. But he couldn't do that. He was the father. He was the only responsible adult. He was all that was left after Faith was gone. "Please, boys." He tried again, this time in a softer voice. "Please get out of there. You'll get hurt." Michael looked at him with those eyes that were just like his mother's, and Richard felt his heart tighten. "Did Aunt Pamela leave?" the boy asked. "Yes." "Because we're bad?" "No, son, you're not." "Luke said that's why Mommy left too," Michael continued, without waiting for an answer. "Because we were very bad." Richard was speechless. He knelt right there in the middle of the glass shards and opened his arms. The 3 boys ran to him, and it was in that tight hug that Richard finally let the tears fall. It was 5 in the morning when the doorbell rang. Richard opened his eyes in the office armchair, where he had spent another night without really being able to sleep. He got up with his body aching and went to the door, expecting maybe a delivery or a neighbor complaining about yesterday's noise. At the gate was a woman he had never seen before. Short, with graying hair tied in a bun, she held an old bag in one hand and had a calm smile on her face. "Good morning. I'm Nancy, from the cleaning company. I'm here for the scheduled service today." Richard blinked, confused. He didn't remember scheduling anything, but then he recalled the conversation with his secretary 2 weeks ago. She had insisted that the house needed a deep cleaning, that the nannies complained about the mess, that it wasn't helping at all. "Oh yes, sorry, I'd completely forgotten." "No problem. May I come in?" He opened the gate and let her pass. Nancy entered the house, looking around with that calm that seemed impossible for someone seeing that destruction for the first time. The living room looked like it had been hit by a small tornado. Cushions scattered, books on the floor, broken toys, pen marks on the wall. "Are the boys still sleeping?" she asked, showing no shock at the state of the house. "They are, but not for long. They wake up early." "That's fine. I'll start here then." Richard went back to the office where he had an online meeting in half an hour. He needed to try to salvage something of the day, even if his personal life was completely in pieces. He turned on the computer and began reviewing the company's numbers. The furniture factory he had inherited from his father was doing reasonably well, but in recent months he had been absent so much, so distracted, that some important contracts were starting to waver. That's when he heard the shouts. He dropped everything and ran to the living room. The triplets had woken up and come down the stairs like a small army. Michael was pulling the curtain so hard that the rod was almost coming off the wall. David was throwing pillows at the chandelier. Luke was standing on the sofa, jumping and shouting something incomprehensible. And there was Nancy standing in the middle of that chaos, holding the floor cloth, just watching. I'm sorry," said Richard, running to try to hold Michael. "They're difficult in the morning." Nancy didn't answer. She simply dropped the cloth on the floor, closed her eyes, and began to sing. Her voice was low at first, an old melody that Richard couldn't identify, but that somehow seemed familiar. The words were simple, about a star in the sky and a boy who wanted to reach it. Michael stopped pulling the curtain. David let the pillow fall to the floor. Luke went quiet on the sofa, just looking at that woman who sang as if nothing else existed in the world. Richard felt a lump in his throat, Faith used to sing that song. It was an old lullaby that her grandmother sang, and that she had adapted to lull the boys when they were babies. How did that woman know that song? The three boys approached Nancy slowly, as if hypnotized. They sat on the floor very close to her and stayed there quiet, just listening. It was the first time in 5 months that Richard saw his children completely silent for more than 30 seconds. When Nancy finished singing, Michael asked softly, "Do you know more songs? I know many. But now you need to have breakfast. Who here likes bread and butter?" All three raised their hands at the same time. "Then let's go to the kitchen. But there's a rule. Only those who help me set the table get breakfast." And to Richard's complete astonishment, the boys followed her without complaining, without shouting, without destroying anything along the way. He stood still in the living room, trying to process what had just happened. He looked at the clock. He had missed the online meeting. But somehow that didn't seem important at the moment. In the kitchen, Nancy had already set the boys to arranging plates and napkins. She moved with a natural ease, as if she had known that house for years. She cut the bread, spread the butter, poured the milk, all while talking with the triplets about simple things: the weather, the little birds in the tree outside, the colors of the plates. "Are you going to stay here?" David asked suddenly. "I'll stay until I finish the cleaning. That's what they called me for." "And after?" "After, I'll go to another house." "I don't want you to go," said Luke, and Richard noticed it was the first complete sentence his son had spoken since the last nanny left. Nancy smiled and stroked the boy's head. "Everything has its time, my dear. Now it's time to eat this delicious bread." Richard watched everything from the doorframe, unsure whether to enter or stay there, afraid of breaking that fragile and unlikely moment. He pulled out his phone and sent a message to his secretary. "Cancel everything today. I need to sort something out here at home." He spent the whole day watching Nancy work. She cleaned the house with impressive efficiency, but the most surprising thing was how she handled the children. Whenever the boys started to get restless, she simply stopped what she was doing and sang, or told a story, or asked for their help with some simple task. At 4 in the afternoon, when she gathered her things to leave, the three boys clung to her legs, crying. "Please don't go, please," begged Michael. "There's more house to clean tomorrow, my love. But it was very nice to meet you." Richard felt he needed to do something. She was the first person in months who could make his children behave, who could bring a little peace into that house. "Nancy, wait a moment," he called, following her to the gate. I need to make a proposal. You can speak. Don't stay as a cleaner. Stay as a nanny, as the children's caregiver. I'll pay double what you earn at the cleaning company, triple if needed." She stopped and looked at him with those eyes that seemed to see beyond the surface of things. "Mr. Richard, I appreciate the offer, but I can't accept. Please, you saw how they were with you. In 5 months, no nanny has lasted more than a week. You achieved something in one day that no one else could. I understand, but I have other commitments. My mother is sick. She needs me. Then bring her too. She can live here, both of you. There are spare rooms in this house." Nancy shook her head. "It's not that simple." "Please," Richard heard his own voice faltering. I don't know what else to do. They were normal children before. They played, laughed, obeyed me. After Faith was gone, they became like this. And I can't reach them. I try, but they don't listen to me. It's as if I'm not their father, as if I'm just another stranger trying to control them." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Nancy remained silent for a long moment, looking at the house, at Richard, at the boys watching from the window. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "But I promise nothing." That night the triplets refused to eat. They sat at the table, looked at the food Richard had prepared, and simply didn't touch their plates. "Boys, you need to eat something." "I want Mrs. Nancy to come back," said Michael. "She's thinking about whether she can come back, but it's not certain." "Then I won't eat until she comes back," the boy replied, crossing his arms. Richard tried to argue, tried to negotiate, but the three were unyielding. He ended up letting them go to their room without dinner, feeling like the worst father in the world. Later, when he went to say goodnight, he found the three sleeping together in the same bed, hugging each other, and his heart broke a little more. The next day, at 9 in the morning, the doorbell rang. Richard answered the intercom and heard Nancy's voice. "Good morning. I came to talk about the proposal." He opened the gate so fast he almost tripped over his own feet. Nancy was there, but not alone. Beside her was a wheelchair, and in it sat an even older lady, with completely white hair and a penetrating gaze. "This is my mother, Mrs. Agnes," Nancy introduced. "Before I accept anything, you need to meet her and understand that I can't be away from her." Of course, please come in." They entered the house. The triplets, who were in the living room playing, or rather destroying, the bookshelf, stopped immediately when they saw Nancy. They ran to her, hugging her legs again. But then they noticed the lady in the wheelchair. Michael approached slowly, curious. "Who are you, ma'am?" "I'm Mrs. Nancy's mother. You can call me Grandma Aggie." "You can't walk?" "Not very well, no. My legs are tired." "Can I push the chair?" Agnes smiled. "Yes, you can, my dear." And so, simply and naturally, the boys began taking turns, pushing the wheelchair around the house, showing every room, every toy, every little corner they considered special. Nancy and Richard stood there watching. "They lost their mother 5 months ago," Nancy asked quietly. "Yes. Faith had a heart problem no one knew about. It was all very quick. 1 week she was fine. The next—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "And how have you been dealing with it?" "Badly. Very badly. I work too much. They see me little. And when I'm here, I don't know how to talk to them about what happened. Every time I try to bring up the subject, they get aggressive or shut down. So I stopped trying." "And the nannies?" "They came and went. All complained about the same thing. They said they were uncontrollable, destructive, disrespectful. One of them said it was a case for a child psychologist. I took them to 3 different professionals. None could get them to talk. They stayed silent through entire appointments, looking at the floor." Nancy nodded, thoughtful. "They're not bad, they're suffering." "I know, but I don't know how to help." "Let me tell you something, Richard. Before working in cleaning, I was a teacher for 25 years. I worked with children of all ages, from all situations. I've seen children in mourning, traumatized children, children who lost everything. And one thing I learned is that children don't need someone who tries to fix them. They need someone who understands they're already fixing themselves the way they know how. We just need to be around when they need us." "Why did you leave education?" Nancy's face closed off a bit. "That's a longer conversation. But in short, I defended a child who was being treated unfairly for having a learning difficulty. The administration didn't like it. They gave me the choice to resign or be fired for insubordination. I chose to leave with my head held high. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was the right decision. But now life is different. I take care of my mother, do some cleaning gigs, I get by." "What about staying here, to take care of the boys?" Nancy took a deep breath. "I can stay, but with conditions. First, my mother comes along. Second, I won't live here. I'll come every morning and leave in the late afternoon. Third, when my mother needs medical care, I need to be able to leave. Fourth, don't call me a nanny. I'm a caregiver, educator, or simply Nancy. I accept everything. And there's one more thing. I'll need your cooperation too. It's no use me establishing rules and routines if you come and undo everything. What do you need me to do? I need you to stop working so much, that you have dinner with your children every day, that you put them to bed, that you talk to them about their mother, even if it's hard, even if you cry in front of them. They need to see that their father is suffering too, that they're not alone in this." Richard felt a lump in his throat. It was exactly what he had been avoiding doing. He had built a wall around his own pain, thinking that way he would be stronger for the boys. But maybe he was just becoming more distant. "I'll try." "I don't want you to try. I want you to do it." "Then I'll do it." Nancy extended her hand. "We have a deal." They shook hands, and Richard felt, for the first time in a long time, a small spark of hope. The first days with Nancy were a revelation. She arrived at 7 in the morning, already bringing Mrs. Agnes. The routine she established was simple but firm. Breakfast at 7:30, free play until 9, guided activities until 11, lunch at noon, rest until 2, more play until 4, snack at 4:30, and time with their father from 5 until bedtime. At first, the boys resisted. They tested every limit. They screamed, cried, threw food, refused to do the activities. But Nancy had infinite patience. When they yelled, she lowered her voice. When they threw food, she simply cleaned it up without lecturing. When they refused the activities, she did them alone until they got curious and wanted to join. And always, always, she sang. The songs were old, from a time Richard barely remembered. Circle songs, lullabies, folk songs that his own grandmother sang when he was a child. And somehow, those simple melodies calmed the boys in a way that no expensive toy or television show could. Mrs. Agnes also had her role. Even in the wheelchair, she told stories. Stories from the countryside, from when she was young, about talking animals and magical places that existed only in her imagination. The boys would sit around the chair as if it were a campfire, completely absorbed. "Grandma Aggie, tell the one about the frog who turned into a prince," Luke would ask. "I've told that one 3 times today, my love." "But I like it." "All right then, but this time you help me tell it." And off they went, building the story together, each adding absurd details that made everyone laugh. Richard watched all this from the shadows, working in the office, but always with one eye on what was happening in the house. And every night, as promised, he had dinner with his sons. At first, the meals were tense and silent. The boys didn't know how to react to this father who suddenly wanted to be present, but gradually, small conversations began to emerge. "Dad, today we drew a picture of space," David said one night. "Really? Can I see it?" "Later. It's upstairs." "Cool. Do you guys like space?" "Uh-huh." "Michael said Mum became a star." Richard swallowed hard. There it was, the subject he had avoided for 5 months. "And what do you think about that?" "I think it's true," said Michael, without looking at his father. "Because she disappeared, but she's still somewhere. Stars are like that. We don't see them during the day, but they're always there." "That's a beautiful way to think," Richard managed to say, his voice choked. "Do you think she's happy becoming a star?" Luke asked. "I think that—" Richard stopped, trying to find the right words. "I think that wherever she is, she wants you to be happy, to play, to laugh, to be children. And can we be sad too?" "Of course you can. I get sad sometimes. I miss her a lot." "Do you cry?" "I cry." "We do too," said Michael, finally looking at his father. "But Mrs. Nancy said it's okay to cry, that we don't have to hide it." Richard felt the tears fall. He didn't try to hold them back. And when the 3 boys got up from their chairs and came to hug him, he let them feel that their father was human too, that he also suffered, that he also needed comfort. 2 weeks passed in this new routine. The house was tidier, the boys were calmer, and Richard could work better knowing there was someone competent taking care of everything. But then came the first complication. He was in a meeting with suppliers when his secretary knocked on the door with a worried expression. "Dr. Richard, there's a woman here wanting to speak with you. She says she's from social services." His heart froze. Social services only showed up when someone had filed a complaint. He left the meeting and went to meet a woman about 40 years old with a serious look and a folder in her hand. "Mr. Parker, I'm Catherine Roberts, a social worker. I received an anonymous notification that your children may be in a risky situation." "Risk? What do you mean, risk?" "The complaint alleges that the children are without adequate supervision, that the house is in poor condition, and that you don't have availability to care for them due to work." "That's absurd. I just hired an excellent caregiver." "I understand, but I need to conduct an assessment visit to the residents. It's standard procedure." "When?" "Tomorrow at 10 in the morning. Can you be present?" "I can." "Great. Until tomorrow, then." Richard returned to his office with shaky legs. Who could have made such a complaint? One of the vengeful former nannies, some neighbor bothered by the noise. He immediately called Nancy and explained the situation. "Don't worry," she said, with that calm that was already her trademark. "The house is tidy, the boys are well cared for. Everything will be fine." But Richard knew it wasn't that simple. Social services looked at everything. She assessed family structure, emotional stability, housing conditions. And he was a single father, recently widowed, who worked too much and had 3 children with a history of difficult behavior. It wasn't the ideal scenario. The next day, Catherine arrived promptly at 10. Richard opened the gate and led her inside. The house was impeccable. Nancy had outdone herself. Everything was clean, organized, smelling nice. The boys were in the living room doing a painting activity, supervised by Nancy, while Mrs. Agnes read a book in the wheelchair. "Good morning," greeted Catherine. "Are these your children?" "They are, Michael, David, and Luke." The boys looked at the unfamiliar woman with suspicion. Catherine bent down to their level. "Hi, everyone. I came here to get to know you. What are you painting?" "A dinosaur," replied Michael, wary. "How cool. Can I see?" Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. But before Michael could respond, Luke spilled the paint pot on the floor. It was accidental, but the effect was disastrous. The red paint spread across the floor, splashing onto Catherine's legs. "Oh no," murmured Richard. The boys started getting nervous. David climbed onto the sofa. Michael threw the brush away. Luke started crying. It was exactly the kind of destructive behavior the complaint mentioned, happening right in front of the social worker. Catherine looked around, making notes in her folder. Richard felt panic rising. He was going to lose his children. He was going to lose everything. That's when Nancy approached Catherine and said in a calm voice, "Sorry for the mess. You know how it is. Kids sometimes get nervous around strangers, especially after losing their mother. They're still adjusting. And you are?" "I'm Aunt Nancy, sister of Faith, the boy's mother. I've been living here since she passed, to help my brother-in-law with the children." Richard's eyes widened. That was a complete lie. Nancy wasn't Faith's sister. She barely knew the family. But she was there, looking at Catherine with such a sincere, natural expression that it seemed impossible to doubt. "I understand," said Catherine, writing something down. "And the lady in the wheelchair? That's my mother, the children's grandmother. She loves telling them stories." Mrs. Agnes waved from the chair, joining in without hesitation. "They're my dear grandchildren. If only their parents would let me give them too much candy." Catherine continued asking questions about routine, meals, school, which would start soon, activities, medical care. Nancy answered everything with impressive confidence, as if she had really been part of the family for years. After almost 2 hours of evaluation, Catherine closed the folder. "Well, Mr. Parker, from what I've seen here, the children seem well cared for. The house is in order. There's an adequate family structure, and the boys show emotional bonds with the responsible adults. I'll file the complaint as unfounded, but I recommend you continue investing in psychological support for them. Childhood grief is a long process." "I'll do that, thank you." When Catherine left, Richard waited until the car disappeared down the street before turning to Nancy. "Why did you lie?" "Because the truth would complicate things. If she knew I'm just a hired caregiver with no family ties, she'd question the stability of the situation. She'd think you could fire me at any time and leave the boys without supervision again. But what if she investigates? If she finds out you're not Faith's sister? Then we'll deal with it when it happens, but for now you keep your children, and they keep a routine that's working. It was the best option." Mrs. Agnes coughed, getting their attention. "Dear, you'll have to tell him sooner or later." "Tell him what?" asked Richard. Nancy sighed, sitting down on the couch. "There are things in my past that I'd rather leave buried. But if we're going to keep up this lie, you need to know the truth about who I really am." The boys had gone to play in the backyard. Mrs. Agnes was dozing in her chair. It was a moment for confessions that Richard wasn't sure he wanted to hear, but knew he needed to. "When I was 20, Nancy began. "I got pregnant by a guy I met in college. We were young, in love, irresponsible. When I told him about the baby, he disappeared, moved to another city, cut off contact, left me completely alone." She looked at her hands, lost in painful memories. "My family was traditional. My father didn't accept it, said I had dishonored the family name, that I had to fix the situation. My mother tried to defend me, but back then she had no voice. So I did the only thing I thought I could do. I had the baby in secret and gave him up for adoption." "I'm sorry," murmured Richard. "It was a boy. I held him for 5 minutes before they handed him over to the adoptive parents. 5 minutes that marked the rest of my life. I looked into his eyes and promised that one day, if he wanted to find me, I'd be waiting." "And you kept the promise?" "I did. I left my information in all possible records. Anyone looking for me would be able to find me. But 40 years passed. He never looked." "Is that why you left teaching?" "Partly. Working with children every day reminded me of him, of what it would have been like if I had stayed, of what it would have been like if I had been strong enough to stand up to my father. It was eating me up inside until that episode with the special needs child happened. I ended up exploding, saying things I shouldn't have, and they gave me the perfect excuse to fire me." "And your parents?" "My mother stood by me when she found out about the adoption. She fought with my father, separated from him. She moved in with me in a tiny room. We survived together all these years. My father, I haven't heard from him in decades. I don't know if he's alive or not, and honestly, I don't care." Richard fell silent, processing everything. "That's why you're so good with my children. They're a second chance in some way. It's not quite like that. I'm not trying to replace the son I lost with your boys, but when I look at them, I see that same lost look, that same pain of someone who's lost someone important. And I know more than anyone what it's like to grow up with a hole in your chest." "Did the boys hear the conversation?" Nancy and Richard turned at the same time and saw the three of them standing at the back door, looking at her with wide eyes. "You had a son?" asked Michael. Nancy took a deep breath. "I did, but it was a long time ago. And he went away? He went to live with another family, a family that could take better care of him than I could at the time." "Were you sad?" "Very sad. Every day for a long time." Luke came closer and climbed onto her lap. "But now you have us." "I do, and you make me very happy." David also came closer, followed by Michael. The three of them hugged Nancy with that innocent strength that only children have, and she let the tears fall without bothering to hide them. The following weeks brought a peace that Richard hadn't experienced in months. The routine worked. The boys improved every day. They ate properly, did their activities, and even started showing interest in making friends with children from the neighborhood who played at the nearby playground. But Richard knew that nothing lasts forever. It was on a Thursday that Mrs. Agnes fell ill. She had just finished telling a story about a mermaid who lived in a river in the countryside when she started coughing. The cough got worse, she started having trouble breathing, and Nancy immediately called an ambulance. "Everything will be okay," she said, holding her mother's hand. "Just a bad flu, you'll see." But Richard saw the fear in her eyes. That wasn't fear of the flu. The ambulance arrived and took Mrs. Agnes. Nancy went along. Richard stayed with the boys, trying to calm them as they cried, worried about Grandma Aggie. "Is she coming back?" Luke asked between sobs. "Yes, she is. The doctors will take care of her and she'll get better." But as he said that, Richard thought of Faith, of the doctors who had also said they would take care of her, that everything would be fine. Until it wasn't. Nancy only returned the next day, with eyes swollen from crying and an expression of absolute exhaustion. "How is she?" asked Richard. "Pneumonia. Severe. Her age complicates things. They'll keep her under observation for at least a week." "And you? Are you okay?" "No, I'm not okay. She's all I have. If I lose her—" "You won't lose her. You can't promise that. You of all people know you can't." Richard had no answer for that, so he just hugged Nancy and let her cry on his shoulder, just like she had let the boys cry on her shoulder so many times. That night, after putting the triplets to sleep, Nancy left saying she was going straight to the hospital to stay with her mother. Richard offered a ride, but she refused, said she needed some time alone. He stayed up late, working on company reports, but unable to concentrate properly. He thought of Nancy, of Mrs. Agnes, of how those two women had completely changed their lives in just a few weeks. That's when he heard footsteps coming down the stairs. It was Michael. "Dad, I can't sleep." "Come here." The boy snuggled on the couch beside him. "Worried about Grandma Aggie?" "Yeah, and about Mrs. Nancy too. She was really sad." She was indeed. It's hard when someone we love gets sick. Like when Mom got sick. Yes, like when Mom got sick. Michael stayed quiet for a moment, just staring into space. "Dad, I remember Mom every day, but sometimes I'm afraid I'll forget her voice. Is that normal?" Richard felt his heart tighten. He pulled his son closer. "Yes, it's normal. And you know what we do when we're afraid of forgetting. We remember together. Want me to tell some stories about her?" "Yes." And there they stayed, father and son, until late at night, remembering Faith. The jokes she told, the songs she sang, the way she made pancakes every Saturday morning, the places she liked to go. Each memory was a way of keeping her alive, of making sure the boys would grow up knowing who their mother was. When Michael finally fell asleep on the couch, Richard carried him back to the bedroom and lay down with his 3 sons. There, in that room full of toys and drawings on the walls, he made a silent promise. He would be a better father. He would be present. He would make sure the boys never doubted his love. Mrs. Agnes remained hospitalized for 10 days. During this time, Nancy divided her time between the hospital and Richard's house, always arriving late and leaving early, but never failing to show up. The boys made drawings every day for Grandma Aggie, and Nancy took them to the hospital, sticking them all on the wall beside her bed. "She loves them," Nancy would say. "She keeps looking at the drawings and smiling, even with all the tubes and machines." On the 11th day, Mrs. Agnes was discharged. Nancy called Richard, asking for help to pick her up and take her home. When they arrived at the house where the two lived, Richard was shocked. It was a small shack in an outlying community. 2 tiny rooms, one serving as bedroom and living room, the other as kitchen. The bathroom was shared with other residents of the hallway. There was no ramp for the wheelchair. Nancy had to carry her mother in her arms to climb the entrance steps. "Nancy, you can't stay here," said Richard, "especially now with her needing special care. It's what we have." "Then accept my previous offer. Come live in my house. There's extra space. There's a room on the ground floor that's perfect for your mother. There's an adapted bathroom I can have installed in 2 days. Richard, I already told you. I know what you said, but now it's different. Your mother needs care. The boys need you. And honestly, I need you too. Not as a cleaner or caregiver, but as family. Like you told the social worker. Let's make that a reality." Nancy looked at her mother, who nodded slightly. "You're tired of climbing stairs, daughter," said Mrs. Agnes, her voice weak. "And you're tired of worrying about me. Accept the help. We deserve some peace." That's how 2 weeks later, Nancy and Mrs. Agnes officially moved into Richard's house. The ground floor room was renovated, with an adapted bathroom, an electric hospital bed, and all the necessary equipment. The boys helped set it up, bringing flowers, pictures, cushions, everything to make the space more welcoming. On the first night sleeping all under the same roof, Richard made a special dinner. Nothing too elaborate. He wasn't a great cook, but he put effort into making a cowboy rice dish he had learned from his own mother. "It's tasty," said Luke, with his mouth full. "Don't talk with your mouth full, honey," corrected Nancy, automatically, and then stopped, realizing what she had done. "Sorry, I didn't mean to—" "No need to apologize," interrupted Richard. "They need someone to correct them, to teach them. You're doing exactly what you should." After dinner, Mrs. Agnes asked to tell a story. The boys gathered around her chair, and she began to talk about a distant kingdom where 3 princes needed to work together to save a magical treasure. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Richard watched from the doorway, and for the first time in a long time, he could see a future. Not a perfect future without pain or longing, but a possible future where that house became a home again. 2 months passed in this new arrangement. The routine was established. The boys were about to start school soon, something that had seemed impossible before given their behavior, but now was perfectly feasible. They made friends at the little park, participated in activities, even started asking to get a dog. That's when life decided to throw another twist. Richard was at the factory office when he received a call from an unknown number. "Hello? Mr. Richard Parker?" "Yes, speaking. My name is Jonathan Fisher. I'm a lawyer. I'm calling on behalf of a client who prefers to remain anonymous for now, but would like to speak with Mrs. Nancy Smith. I understand she works for you?" "She does. But why does a lawyer want to speak with her?" "It's a personal and delicate matter. Would it be possible for you to pass on her contact? Not without knowing what it's about." "I understand your caution. I can only say it's a family matter that may be of great interest to her." Richard immediately became suspicious. Family matter? Nancy had no family besides her mother. Unless, does it have to do with her son? Silence on the other end. "Mr. Parker, I can neither confirm nor deny anything without speaking with Mrs. Nancy first. It's a matter of my client's privacy. I'll pass the message to her. If she wants to speak with you, she'll call." Richard wrote down the number and kept it. When he got home that night, Nancy was in the kitchen preparing dinner while the boys played in the living room. He called her aside to talk privately. "You got a call today? From a lawyer?" He saw the color drain from her face. "A lawyer?" "He said he has a client with a family matter to discuss with you. He didn't want to give details, but—" "Nancy, do you think it could be your son?" She leaned against the sink, her legs weak. "After 40 years? Why now?" "I don't know, but I think you should call. Find out what it's about. What if it's a scam? What if someone's trying to take advantage? Then you find that out and send them away, but what if it's real? Will you be able to live without knowing?" Nancy stayed silent for a long moment. Then she took the paper with the number and put it in her pocket. "I'll think about it." But Richard knew that thinking meant being afraid, fear of hope, fear of disappointment, fear that 40 years of waiting would finally have an answer, and that this answer might not be what she wanted to hear. That night, after putting the boys to sleep, Richard found Nancy sitting in the backyard looking at the stars. "Can't stop thinking about it, huh?" "I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see that baby. 5 minutes. That's all I had. And now maybe he wants to meet me, or maybe he wants to sue me or blame me, or maybe he just wants to know who his mother is. What if he hates me? What if he doesn't?" Nancy looked at Richard with teary eyes. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this. You're the strongest woman I know. Raised your mother alone after your father abandoned you. Worked your whole life in tough jobs. Lost the career you loved for defending a child. Took care of my kids when no one else could. If there's anyone strong enough for this, it's you." She smiled through her tears. "When did you get so wise?" "Ever since a certain cleaner came into my house singing and changed everything." The next day, Nancy called the lawyer. The conversation was short. He scheduled a meeting for the following week at an office downtown. He said the client would be present and would like to meet her in person. The week that followed was pure anxiety. Nancy barely slept. She kept rehearsing what to say, how to react, what to do if it was really her son. The boys noticed something was wrong. "Mrs. Nancy is sad again," commented David during dinner. "She's not sad, honey. She's nervous," explained Richard. "Why?" "Because she's going to meet someone very important. More important than us. Different, not more important." Michael looked at Nancy with those perceptive eyes she knew so well. "It's your son, isn't it? We heard you and Dad talking." Nancy sighed. It was useless trying to hide anything from those children. "Yes, it might be him." "And if it is, are you going to leave?" "No," she answered too quickly, startling even herself with her vehemence. "No, my darlings, I'm not leaving. This is my home now. You are my family now. Nothing will change that. Promise? I promise. Luke got up from his chair and hugged Nancy. Then it's okay. But if he's mean to you, we'll beat him up. Everyone laughed, and the tension of the moment dissolved a little. The day of the meeting arrived. Nancy dressed in a simple but pretty dress, one Richard had never seen her wear. Mrs. Agnes fixed her daughter's hair, securing it with a clip that had belonged to her grandmother. "Everything will be fine," said the elderly woman. "I feel it will." Richard offered to go with her, but Nancy refused. She said it was something she needed to do alone. He stayed home with the boys, trying to distract them with games and play. But everyone was worried. Nancy arrived at the lawyer's office at 2 in the afternoon as scheduled. It was a commercial building downtown, nothing too fancy but professional. She went up to the 5th floor and found room 507. She took a deep breath before opening the door. Inside there was a receptionist who greeted her with a smile. "Mrs. Nancy Smith?" "Yes." "Dr. Jonathan is waiting. Right this way, please." She was guided to a meeting room, and there, sitting at a table, was a man about 40 years old. Dark hair just beginning to grey at the temples. Brown eyes that she recognized immediately because they were the same as hers. Next to him was the lawyer, an older man in a blue suit. "Mrs. Nancy, welcome. I'm Jonathan Fisher, and this is my client, Robert Coleman." Robert stood up. He was tall, well-dressed, with an air of someone who worked in something intellectual. A professor, perhaps, or a researcher. He looked at Nancy as one looks at a ghost. "Mother," he said, his voice faltering. Nancy felt her legs tremble. She held onto the chair. "Robert? It's me. I spent 40 years looking for you. But I left my information everywhere. How couldn't you find me before?" "The records were incomplete. Your name was misspelled in some documents. It took years for me to piece it all together, but I finally did." The lawyer stood up. "I'll let you two talk in private. I'll be in the next room if you need me." When the door closed, Nancy and Robert stared at each other. 40 years of questions, of pain, of longing, all concentrated in that impossible moment. "I'm sorry," were the first words Nancy managed to say. "I'm sorry I gave you up. For not fighting to keep you, for not being strong enough." Robert shook his head. "No, don't apologize. You were young, you were alone. I read the adoption report. I know what your father did. I know how difficult it was. Did you have a good life? The parents who adopted you, were they good to you?" "They were wonderful. They gave me everything. Education, love, opportunities. I can't complain about anything." "Then why look for me? If you had everything, why?" "Because there was a piece missing. There always was. No matter how much love my parents gave me, there was always that question, why did my birth mother give me up? Was it because she didn't love me? Because I was a mistake? Because I wasn't good enough?" Nancy's tears fell uncontrollably. "Never, never for those reasons. I loved you from the first second. I love you still. I gave you up because I thought you deserved more than I could offer. A single mother, poor, without family support, without stability. I thought I was doing what was best for you." Robert stepped closer and hesitantly touched her hand. "Thank you for telling me that. I needed to hear it." They talked for hours. Nancy told him about her life, about how she became a teacher trying to fill the void, about how she lost her job, about how she met Richard and the boys. Robert told her about growing up in a loving family, about becoming an architect, about getting married and having 2 children of his own. "You're a grandmother," he said, smiling. "You have 2 grandchildren, a girl who's 8 and a boy who's 5. Nancy covered her mouth with her hand, too emotional to speak. "Do they know about me?" "They know I've been looking for you. My wife Jennifer was the one who encouraged me not to give up. She said every child deserves to know their roots. Could I meet them? I'd like that very much, but slowly, no pressure, at everyone's own pace." When Nancy returned home, it was already night. She walked through the door and found Richard and the boys awake, waiting for her in the living room. "So?" asked Richard. Nancy couldn't speak. She just cried. But this time, they were tears of joy. It was him. My son. After 40 years, I found my son. The boys ran to hug her. Richard came closer and touched her shoulder, sharing her joy. "Did he forgive you?" "There was nothing to forgive. He understood. And he wants to get to know me better. He wants me to meet his family. So it's a happy ending. It's a happy beginning, a new start." Mrs. Agnes, who was in her wheelchair watching everything, wiped her own tears. "You deserve this, my dear." She deserves all the happiness in the world. In the following days, Nancy and Robert began meeting regularly, always in neutral places at first, a coffee shop, a park, a diner. They talked about everything and nothing. He shared about the architectural projects he was working on. She told him about the boys and how they had changed her life. "You speak of them with such affection," Robert observed during one of these meetings, "as if they were your own children." "In a way they are, not biologically, but in my heart. They needed someone, and I needed to be needed by someone. It was a perfect match. I want to meet them, and I want you to meet my children too." "Are you sure?" "I don't want to rush things." "I'm sure. You're their grandmother. Even if you didn't raise their father, you're family, and family should know each other." The meeting was set for a Saturday at a park with a playground for the children. Robert arrived with his wife, Jennifer, a friendly woman around 35, and their 2 children, Amy and Peter. Nancy brought Richard and the triplets. She also insisted that Mrs. Agnes come, saying the mother deserved to be present for that moment. The adults were tense at first, unsure how to act, but the children, as they often do, broke the ice immediately. Michael, David, and Luke pulled Amy and Peter to play on the slide, and within 5 minutes they were all laughing and running together as if they were old friends. "They're beautiful," said Nancy, watching her grandchildren. "Amy takes after her mother. She's studious and serious. Peter is more of a troublemaker, reminds me of myself when I was little." "And do they know who I am?" "They know your Grandma Nancy." The Grandma Daddy looked for a long time and finally found. Amy approached shyly. "Grandma Nancy, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "Why did it take you so long to meet us?" Nancy knelt to be at the girl's level. "Because sometimes things are complicated. But what matters is that we're together now and we'll have plenty of time to make beautiful memories. Is that okay?" "Okay. Will you tell us stories like the grandma who lives far away does?" "I'll tell you all the stories you want." Peter also came closer. "And will you teach us how to sing? Dad said you sing really well." "Yes, I'll teach you." And right there, in the middle of the park with the children around her, Nancy began to sing that same lullaby that had calmed the triplets the first time. Amy and Peter were enchanted, and soon all 5 were trying to sing along, off-key but happy. Jennifer approached Richard. "You two are—" "Just friends, or rather family. It's complicated to explain." "I understand. Robert told me how you met. It was very kind of you to let her be part of your children's lives like that. It wasn't kindness. It was necessity. She saved my family when I didn't know what else to do. It seems she has a gift for that." They watched Nancy interacting with all the children, giving out hugs and smiles as if she had endless love to give. And maybe she did. The gathering lasted the rest of the afternoon. They had an impromptu picnic. The children played until they were tired, and as the sun began to set, they said goodbye with promises to meet again soon. On the way back home, the triplets chatted excitedly about their new friends. "Dad, do we have more siblings now?" asked Luke. "Not exactly. They're more like cousins. But Mrs. Nancy is their grandma, and she lives with us, so we're family." Richard glanced in the rearview mirror at Nancy, who was smiling in the back seat. "Yeah, I guess we're all family now." The weeks that followed were a time of adjustment. Nancy divided her time between taking care of the triplets during the day and meeting Robert, Jennifer, and her grandchildren on weekends. Mrs. Agnes was recovering well from pneumonia and had resumed telling her elaborate stories, now with an expanded audience whenever everyone gathered. But just as every story that seems to be finding its way, life had other twists in store. Richard began noticing problems at the factory. Two of the biggest clients cancelled contracts without giving clear explanations. An important supplier abruptly raised prices. The numbers that had always been solid started looking worrisome. In a meeting with the accountant, the truth came out. "Richard, the situation is serious. If you don't secure new contracts in the next 3 months, you'll have to make drastic cuts. Maybe even sell the house to cover the company's debts." "Sell the house? No, that's not an option. Then you need a miracle. Or an investor willing to put money into a company that's bleeding." Richard left that meeting in shock. How had things reached this point without him noticing? Simple. He had gotten distracted. Months focused only on home and children, neglecting the work that paid all the bills. He didn't tell Nancy anything in the first few days. He tried to handle it alone, making contacts, sending proposals, seeking new clients. But the more he tried, the more doors closed. The market was tough, the competition aggressive, and he was outdated after being away for so long. It was Luke who ended up accidentally revealing the secret. "Dad, why do you look so sad when you look at those papers with numbers?" Nancy heard the question from the kitchen and approached. "What papers with numbers?" "It's nothing. Work stuff." "Richard, I've lived here for 4 months. I've learned to read you. What's happening?" He tried to deflect, but she insisted. Finally, sitting at the table after the boys had gone to sleep, Richard told her everything. The lost contracts, the financial situation, the risk of losing the house. "How long can you hold on before you have to make drastic decisions?" 2, maybe 3 months. After that? "And why didn't you tell me earlier?" "Because I thought I could handle it alone. And because you all just found stability here. My mother, you, the boys, even Robert and the kids come over often. This house has become a center, a meeting point. How could I say we might have to abandon everything?" Nancy stayed silent for a moment, thoughtful. "How much do you need to save the company?" "Nancy, no. Don't even think about it." "How much?" Richard sighed and said the number. It was high, very high for someone who had lived their whole life on modest salaries. "I have savings," said Nancy. "It's not much, but no, absolutely not. That money is yours. You saved it your whole life. I won't accept it." "And what are you going to do then? Let everything fall apart?" "I'll find another way." But in the following days it became clear there was no other way. Richard tried loans at banks, but his credit was compromised by the company's debts. He tried to sell part of the factory's shares, but found no buyers interested in a sinking company. It was then that the Triplets decided to intervene in their own way. Michael, David, and Luke had overheard the conversations between Richard and Nancy without anyone noticing. And one afternoon, while the adults were busy, they searched Richard's office trying to understand the situation better. They found documents, reports, numbers that didn't make much sense to 5-year-olds. But they also found something interesting, an old notebook where Faith had written down ideas and reflections. "Look at this," said Michael, pointing to a page. "Mom wrote about some money saved." "Where?" "It says here, emergency savings, hidden where only we know, for the difficult days I hope never come." The 3 looked at each other. "We need to tell Dad." That night, during dinner, Michael brought the notebook to the table. "Dad, we found this." Richard recognized the notebook immediately. It was Faith's. He hadn't had the courage to open it after she was gone, so he had stored it in a drawer and tried to forget. "Where did you find this?" "In the office. Sorry for going through your things, but we wanted to help." Richard opened the notebook and read the page the boys were showing him. Emergency savings, hidden where only we know. He remembered then. Years ago, when they were building the house, Faith had insisted on creating a secret hiding spot behind a false panel in the closet wall. She kept the jewelry she inherited from her mother there, some important documents, and cash for emergencies. Richard had completely forgotten about that. That same night, after putting the boys to bed, he went to the closet that had been Faith's and was now practically empty. He found the panel, which had been so well disguised it looked like part of the wall. He pressed the secret mechanism, and the panel opened. Inside was a metal box, and inside the box bundles of cash, carefully organized and labeled. It wasn't enough to save the company completely, but it was a good start. It was hope. Richard sat on the closet floor and cried. He cried for the wife who had the wisdom to save for difficult days. He cried for the children who, even though they were so small, wanted to help their father. He cried with relief for having at least part of the solution. When he told Nancy the next day, she smiled. "See? There's always a way. Faith is still taking care of you even though she's no longer here. The money helps, but it's still not enough. Then we use it as a base and build on it. You go after investors showing that you have your own capital to invest too. Show that you believe in your own company. That makes a difference." Nancy was right. With Faith's money as collateral and with a better prepared presentation, Richard managed to schedule meetings with potential investors who previously didn't take him seriously. But the process was slow, bureaucratic, full of back and forth. And meanwhile, the debts kept growing. That's when Robert had an idea. "My architecture firm has some contracts with large construction companies. They're always looking for suppliers of custom furniture for residential projects. I can make some introductions." "Robert, you don't have to." "You took care of my mother when she needed it. Let me return the favor." The introductions worked. Richard managed to present the factory to 3 large construction companies. 2 showed real interest. 1 closed a small test contract, but it brought immediate money and the possibility of larger contracts in the future. Gradually, the situation began to stabilize. It wasn't completely resolved. There was still a long way to go, but at least it was no longer in free fall. Throughout this period of financial crisis, the triplets continued their routine with Nancy, but something had changed in them. They had matured unexpectedly. They started helping more around the house, complaining less, showing genuine concern for their father. "Dad is sad again," David observed one afternoon. "It's because of the money," Michael explained. "But we already helped by finding Mum's money. Now he needs to solve the rest by himself." "We could do something more," Luke suggested. "Like what?" "I don't know. But Mrs. Nancy always says that when we want to help someone, we find a way." The boys thought for a few days, and then they had an idea that seemed absurd on the surface, but had perfect childlike logic. "Let's make a video," Michael announced. "A video of what?" "Of us, showing how we were before and how we are now, showing that kids can change. What family can make it even when everything seems lost? And what's this going to do?" "I don't know. But Amy said her father met an important person because a video of her playing piano became famous online. If our video becomes famous, maybe someone will want to help Dad." It was a child's logic, yes. But there was something touching about the idea. Nancy, when she found out, decided to support it, not because she thought it would work, but because she saw in that project an opportunity for the boys to channel their anxiety into something productive. "All right, let's make this video, but let's do it right. Let's tell our real story." For a week they worked on the video. Nancy recorded with her cell phone. The boys talked about when their mother left, about how they felt lost and angry, about the nannies who left, about the day Nancy arrived singing, about how little by little they became happy children again. Nancy narrated the parts the boys couldn't tell. She talked about Richard crying in the office, about the house in chaos, about the gradual transformation when routine and affection were introduced. Mrs. Agnes made a special appearance, telling how she saw those children embrace her and her daughter as family, even without any blood ties. And Richard, after much insistence, also recorded a testimony. He spoke about the pain of losing his wife, about the despair of not being able to reach his children, about how he was on the verge of losing everything until a humble cleaner appeared and showed that love and patience were more powerful than any elaborate strategy. The final video was 23 minutes long. Nancy edited it on the computer Robert lent her, added a simple background music, and posted it on a video platform without much expectation. In the title, she simply wrote, "The Cleaner Who Saved the Impossible Triplets, Our True Story." In the first 2 days, the video only had a few views, friends and acquaintances who watched out of curiosity. But then, on the third day, something happened. A famous blogger who had a page about parenting shared the video with her followers. She said she had cried watching it, that it was the most beautiful and real story she had seen in a long time. Views started to climb. 100, 500, 1,000, 5,000. In a week, the video had over 2 million views and was still growing. Comments poured in. I cried from beginning to end. What a beautiful story. We need more people like Nancy in the world. These children are an example of resilience. This is what real family means. With the viral spread, direct messages started coming in. Companies wanting to sponsor the family. TV shows wanting to do interviews. Even movie producers interested in adapting the story. Richard was shocked. I don't know what to do with all this. Let's take it easy, said Nancy. No hasty decisions. Let's evaluate each offer carefully. Among the messages, one stood out. It was from a businessman who owned a furniture store chain. He had watched the video and was impressed with Richard's story of keeping his father's factory going even in tough times. He offered a business partnership. His stores would sell furniture from Richard's factory exclusively in 3 states. The contract was generous, fair, and solved all financial problems at once. It's too good to be true, Richard told the lawyer who reviewed the contract. But it is true and it's legal. The guy just identified with your story and wants to do business. It happens. When Richard signed the contract, he felt as if a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The house was saved. The company was saved. All because of a video that 3 5-year-old children had the idea to make. On the night of the signing, there was a celebration at home. Richard insisted on cooking himself, even without much culinary talent. Robert and Jennifer came with the grandchildren. Some close friends were invited. The house was filled with laughter, music, and joy. The triplets, proud to have been part of the solution, kept telling everyone about how they came up with the video idea. Amy and Peter listened in admiration, promising to make their own videos when they had problems to solve. Mrs. Agnes, settled in her wheelchair in a strategic spot in the living room where she could see everything, watched that beautiful chaos with a smile on her face. "Are you happy, Mom?" asked Nancy, approaching. "Happier than I ever imagined I would be. When I was young and married your father, I dreamed of a big family, full of laughter and love. But life was hard on me, on you, on us, and I thought I had lost the chance to have that. But look at us now. I have grandchildren, great-grandchildren, a house full of loved ones. It took a while, but it was worth it. Even after everything we went through. Especially because of that. The good things taste sweeter when we know the taste of bitterness." Nancy hugged her mother, feeling deep gratitude for still having her there, alive, witnessing that moment of happiness. The party went on until late. When everyone had left and the children were finally asleep, exhausted, Richard and Nancy stayed in the kitchen, cleaning up the mess. "Have you ever stopped to think about how everything changed?" asked Richard. "It's only been 7 months since you came here as a cleaner, and now we're a crazy family of 7 living together, with 5 more who visit every weekend. It definitely wasn't what I imagined when I took that cleaning job. Do you regret it?" "What? Finding a purpose again? Reconnecting with my son? Gaining 3 children who fill my life with joy and challenges? How could I regret it?" "You changed our lives, Nancy. Not just the boys. Mine too. You taught me how to be a father again. You taught me that being present is worth more than anything else. And you changed mine. You showed me it's never too late to start over, to build something new on the ruins of what was." They finished cleaning in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the unlikely path that had brought them there. The following months were about adjustments and growth. The contract with the store chain was going well, generating steady demand for the factory. Richard hired more employees and invested in new equipment. The company that was almost bankrupt was now thriving. Robert became a constant presence in the house, especially on Sundays, when everyone gathered for long, noisy lunches. Amy and Peter were practically siblings to the triplets already, fighting and making up with the natural ease of childhood. Mrs. Agnes remained in her wheelchair, but her health was stable. She had become the official storyteller of the expanded family, and the children gathered around her every night asking for a new adventure, invented by her fertile imagination. Nancy continued caring for the triplets during the day, but her role had evolved. She was no longer just a caregiver. She was an educator, counselor, mother figure, friend. The boys called her Aunt Nancy in front of others, but in private moments, a mom sometimes slipped out, which she received with emotion but without making a fuss, understanding it was their way of processing the loss of faith. One Saturday afternoon, 6 months after the contract signing celebration, Richard had an important conversation with Nancy. "I need to tell you something. There's someone who wants to meet me." "Someone? What do you mean?" "A woman, Melissa. I met her at a business meeting about 2 months ago. We talked, hit it off, and she said she'd like to meet me outside of a professional context." Nancy felt something strange in her chest. It wasn't exactly jealousy, or maybe it was. She had built a life so intertwined with Richard and the boys that the idea of him having someone new in his life seemed out of place. "And what did you say?" "That I needed to think. That I have 3 children who come first. That I wasn't looking for anything, but that I'd be happy to get to know her better without expectations." "Sounds reasonable. What do you think?" "I'm not the right person to ask that, Richard. I'm your friend, your employee technically, but I have no authority over your personal decisions. But I want to know your opinion. You know the boys better than anyone. Do you think they'd be ready for this? To see their father with someone else?" Nancy thought carefully before answering. "I think children are more resilient than we imagine. They overcame the loss of their mother, overcame their own destructive behavior, learned to open their hearts to new people. If you introduce this woman the right way, slowly, without pressure, without trying to replace faith, I think they can handle it. And you? Can you handle it?" "Why wouldn't I be able to?" "Because you're part of this family, as much as any of us. And bringing someone new changes the dynamic. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable in your own home. Look, I won't lie and say the idea doesn't affect me, but it affects me because I've gotten used to this routine, to this arrangement we have. Not because I have any claim over your personal life. If this Melissa is a good person, who treats you and the boys with respect, then I'll be happy for you. Thank you for always being so sensible." Richard indeed started dating Melissa. Casual dates at first, always away from home without involving the children. She was divorced, had no children, worked as a corporate lawyer. She was smart, good-humored, and understood that Richard came with considerable baggage. After 3 months of dating, Richard thought it was time to introduce her to the boys. He talked to them first. "Daddy met a friend, a nice person who would like to meet you, but only if you want to." "Is she your girlfriend?" asked Michael, direct as always. "We're getting to know each other better, but yes, she's a special friend." "Is she going to live here?" "No, at least not for now. She's just going to come have lunch with us one of these days." "And Mrs. Nancy?" "Nancy is still here. Nothing changes regarding her." The boys looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations only triplets have. "Okay," said David finally. "But if she's mean to us, she leaves, right? If she's mean to you, she leaves immediately, I promise." Melissa came on a Sunday. She brought gifts for the boys, but thoughtful gifts, not just expensive toys bought without criteria. A dinosaur book for Michael, who was obsessed with the theme. A board game for David, who loved strategy. A painting kit for Luke, who was always drawing. The children were suspicious at first, but Melissa had a natural ease with them. She didn't try to force intimacy. She didn't speak in a childish tone. She just talked normally, asked about their interests and joined in the games when invited. Nancy watched from afar, helping Mrs. Agnes with lunch, trying not to judge. Melissa seemed genuinely interested in being part of Richard's life the right way, respecting boundaries, understanding that the boys needed time. After lunch, when Melissa left, the triplets gave their verdict. "She's nice, but she's not mommy." "No one is going to be mommy, boys. No one will replace her. But sometimes we can let new people into our lives in other ways." "Mrs. Nancy is sad," observed Luke, always the most emotionally perceptive. "Why do you think that?" She was quiet the whole lunch. She didn't tell any stories, she didn't sing. She just sat there staring. Richard sighed. He would need to talk to Nancy about this. He found her in the backyard, watering the plants she had started cultivating in recent months. The boys think you're sad. I'm not sad, I'm just processing. Processing what? Changes. This house was one way, and now it's going to be another. It's natural, it's even good. But it still stirs things up. Nancy, you understand nothing will change between us, right? You're still an essential part of this family. I know. But at the same time, I'm the caregiver, the employee. If you marry this woman, she'll want to take charge of the house, of the boys. And where exactly will I be? In the same place you've always been. It's not about roles or titles. It's about the fact that these children love you, that this house is your home as much as it is mine. That you're not disposable just because my personal life is moving forward. Are you sure Melissa thinks that way too? I talked to her about you. I explained the whole story. She understands you're irreplaceable. People say one thing and do another when circumstances change. Then we'll deal with it, if and when it happens. But don't create a problem that doesn't exist yet. Nancy nodded, but Richard could see the worry hadn't completely gone away. In the following months, Melissa became a more frequent presence in the house. She and Nancy developed a polite but distant relationship. They weren't friends, but they respected each other. Melissa didn't try to interfere with decisions about the boys, and Nancy didn't comment on Richard's relationship. It was Mrs. Agnes, with her wisdom from having lived a long life and seen it all, who finally forced a conversation between the two. "You two need to stop circling each other like scared cats," she said one afternoon when the three of them were alone in the house. "Sit down here and have a real talk." "Mum, it's not necessary." "Yes, it is. Melissa, you may be an important lawyer with your own life, but you want to be part of this family, and Nancy is already part of this family. So either you find a way to truly understand each other, or there will always be this tension that isn't good for anyone." The two women sat down, somewhat awkwardly. "I'll start," said Melissa. "Nancy, I don't want to take your place. I know you've formed a special bond with these children and with Richard. I don't have any illusion that I'll arrive and take over everything. I just want to have my own space in this dynamic, you know." "And what space would that be?" "I'm not entirely sure yet, but I know it's not about pushing you out. Maybe it's about creating something new where we work together instead of in competition." "I don't think we're in competition." "No? Then why do you get tense every time I show up? Why do you avoid being in the same room as me?" Nancy took a deep breath. "Because I'm afraid. I'm afraid that everything I've built here will fall apart when you officially become part of the family. I'm afraid Richard will decide he doesn't need me anymore. I'm afraid of becoming a stranger in the house where I found my place in the world. I understand that fear. But look, Nancy, you have a son who found you after 40 years. You have grandchildren who adore you. You have these 3 children who see you as a second mother. You have your mother whom you care for so lovingly. You don't need this house to have purpose. Your place in the world is guaranteed by who you are, not by where you live." Mrs. Agnes clapped. "Look at that. The lawyer knows how to argue, didn't I tell you?" Both women laughed, and the tension began to dissolve. "All right," said Nancy. "I'll try to be more open, stop making up problems in my head. And I'll be more careful to show that I value and respect you." It wasn't an instant friendship, but it was a start, and starting was something. Time passed. The triplets turned 6. They started attending real school, making friends, bringing home everyday stories, growing in knowledge and social skills. Destructive behavior was a thing of the past. They still had difficult moments, still cried for their mother sometimes, but they handled the pain in a much healthier way. Amy and Peter continued visiting, and the relationship between Nancy and Robert deepened. He began calling her mother without hesitation. He told her about work challenges, asked for advice about raising the children, included her in all important life decisions. Melissa and Richard got engaged. The proposal was simple at home with the boys present. They approved enthusiastically, having already completely accepted Melissa as part of the family. The wedding was scheduled for 6 months later. It would be a small ceremony, just close family and dear friends. During the preparations, a delicate question arose. "Who will be the boy's godmother?" asked Melissa. "I know usually the godmother is chosen by the parents, but in this case, it has to be Mrs. Nancy," said the triplets in unison. "And if she's their godmother, who will be my matron of honor at the wedding?" asked Melissa. "Can there be two?" wondered Michael. "Not traditionally, but we're not exactly a traditional family anyway." It was decided then. Nancy would be the boys' godmother, as they wanted, and Melissa chose one of her sisters to be her matron of honor at the wedding. The ceremony was beautiful, simple but moving. The triplets were ring-bearers, stumbling in their formal clothes but beaming with happiness. Mrs. Agnes witnessed everything from her wheelchair, tears of joy streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. Robert gave a speech about how family isn't just blood but choice, about how that unlikely collection of people had come together and created something beautiful. When Richard and Melissa exchanged vows, he looked at his children and said, "I promise to be the best father possible to these three amazing children, and I promise to honor Faith's memory, making sure they always know how much they were loved by their mother." Melissa added, "And I promise to be the stepmother they deserve. I won't try to replace anyone, but I'll love them unconditionally and always be there when they need me." There wasn't a dry eye at the ceremony. Life after the wedding required more adjustments. Melissa moved into the house, bringing her belongings, her personality, her way of doing things. There were small conflicts at first, about how to organize the kitchen, about different routines, about shared spaces, but everyone made an effort. Nancy gave space when needed. Melissa respected the established routine. Richard mediated when tensions arose, and the boys, with childhood's natural flexibility, adapted to everything. 1 year after the wedding, a surprise came. Melissa was pregnant. The news was met with mixed reactions. Richard was radiant but nervous, becoming a father again at 40. With 3 7-year-old boys, it was both a frightening and wonderful prospect. The triplets were excited about having a baby brother or sister. "We'll teach him everything," promised David. "Or her," corrected Michael. "It could be a girl. Either way, we're going to be the best big brothers in the world." Nancy had conflicting feelings she didn't share with anyone except her mother. On one hand, she was genuinely happy for the family. On the other, she wondered where she would fit in when there was a real baby, Richard and Melissa's biological child. "You're overthinking again," said Mrs. Agnes. "One child doesn't replace another, and you won't become less important because there's one more in the house. But Melissa will want to care for her own child. She won't need me like she did with the triplets. Then you help in other ways. Take care of the triplets while she cares for the baby. Divide the tasks. Nancy, you've always been good at adapting. It won't be any different now." Melissa had a peaceful pregnancy. Nancy helped her more than Melissa's own mother could, being present at doctor's appointments when Richard couldn't, preparing food when Melissa had nausea, talking about fears and hopes. A genuine bond began to form between them, not one of competition or tolerance, but of real friendship. "I want you to be the baby's godmother," said Melissa in one of those intimate moments, "not out of obligation or politeness, but because you're the person I trust the most to help take care of this child." Nancy was too emotional to respond with words. She just hugged Melissa and both cried together. The baby was born on a spring morning, a girl who was named Hannah. The triplets were fascinated by their little sister, wanting to hold her all the time, creating an organized chaos that left Richard exhausted but happy. In the first months with Hannah, the house became controlled chaos again, but it was a different chaos from years ago. It was a chaos of love, of a family expanding, of people who had learned to work together. Nancy helped with the baby, but also made sure the triplets didn't feel neglected. She played with them while Melissa breastfed, helped with homework, told the usual bedtime stories. Mrs. Agnes, even with her already fragile health, insisted on spending time with her great-granddaughter, singing the same lullabies she had sung for Nancy decades ago. 2 years after Hannah's birth, Mrs. Agnes had a serious health crisis. This time everyone knew it wasn't temporary, it was the beginning of the end. Nancy spent weeks at the hospital with her mother. Richard and Melissa took over everything at home, caring for the children, maintaining the routine, giving whatever support they could. On a winter afternoon, Mrs. Agnes called the whole family to the hospital. She was lucid, but visibly weak. "I want to say a few things while I still can," she began, her voice weak but determined. Everyone gathered around the bed. Nancy held her mother's hand. Richard and Melissa held Hannah in their arms. The triplets, now 9 years old, squeezed between the adults trying to stay close to their great-grandmother. "Nancy, my dear daughter, you gave me the best years of my life. When your father abandoned us, I thought we had lost everything. But you showed me that we had each other, and that was enough. And now look at this. You have a wonderful son, beautiful grandchildren, a family that loves you. You don't need me anymore. You can let me go in peace." "Mum, don't talk like that. Let me finish. Richard, you are a good man. You welcomed my daughter and me when you didn't have to. You built a beautiful family. Keep being that present father you learned to be. I will continue, I promise. Melissa, you too. At first I was suspicious of you, thought you would ruin everything. But you proved it was possible to add without dividing. Take good care of all these boys, and of my daughter too when she feels alone. Don't worry, Mrs. Aggie. And you," she looked at the triplets, "you are proof that children can overcome anything if they have love around them. Never forget your mother, but also never forget that you can have many forms of love and all are valid. We won't forget, Grandma. And Hannah, this little one there in your arms. When she grows up, tell her about the great-grandmother who lived in a wheelchair but had the freest imagination of anyone. Tell the stories I made up. Don't let them die with me. We'll tell them," everyone promised. Mrs. Agnes smiled, closed her eyes, and fell asleep. She wouldn't wake up again. The farewell was painful, but also beautiful. They celebrated her life, the stories, the legacy of love she left behind. The house felt strangely empty without the wheelchair in the corner of the living room, without the nightly stories, without that eternal smile. Nancy entered a difficult phase of grief. She had lost the only person who had been with her forever. Richard and Melissa gave all the support they could, but there was a pain there that needed to be felt and processed in her own time. The triplets, in the innocence of their 9 years, helped in their own way. "Mrs. Nancy, let's make a book with all of Grandma Aggie's stories," Michael suggested one day. "That way, she'll never be forgotten." The idea was so pure, so perfect, that Nancy couldn't refuse. For months, they worked on the project. The boys remembered bits of the stories. Nancy filled in the details. Melissa, with her organizational skills, structured everything. Richard funded a small edition of the book. Grandma Aggie's Stories, Tales to Calm Restless Hearts, was launched at a simple event in the neighborhood bookstore. People came. They bought it. They cried reading the preface about who Mrs. Agnes was. And suddenly, that simple woman who spent her life in a wheelchair had a tangible legacy. Her stories would reach children she would never know, bringing comfort and magic as they had to all who knew her. 3 more years passed. The triplets were 12, Hannah was 5. The house had found its final balance. Nancy continued living there, now more as a family member than as an employee. She had her own space, her routine, but was deeply integrated into everyone's dynamics. Robert visited less frequently. His own family had grown with the birth of a 3rd child. But the bond with Nancy remained strong, with frequent calls and monthly meetings. It was during one of these visits that Robert brought news. "Mum, I'm thinking about expanding the architecture office, opening a 2nd unit in another city, but that means I'll be traveling a lot in the coming years. What about Jennifer and the kids? They'll stay here. She doesn't want to leave the city because of her job and the children's school, but I was thinking if you'd like to spend more time with them, maybe a few days a week." "Robert, I already have my responsibilities here. I know, but I talked to Richard. He said you have the freedom to organize your time as you wish. And the kids, both his and mine, are older now. They don't need constant supervision like before." Nancy considered the proposal. It would be good to spend more time with her grandchildren, get to know them better, be more present in their lives. "I'll think about it." A week later, she reached a decision. She would spend 3 days a week at Robert's house, taking care of Amy, Peter, and the youngest, Tyler. The other 4 days she would stay at Richard's house, maintaining her routine with the boys and Hannah. It was a new adjustment, but it worked surprisingly well. The children in both houses loved having more time with Grandma Nancy, and she felt fulfilled being able to distribute her love and care more evenly among everyone. The triplets, now teenagers, needed her less physically but more emotionally. They were entering that complicated phase of life where everything is intense and confusing, and Nancy was there, offering a perspective that neither Richard nor Melissa could provide. "Mrs. Nancy, can I ask you a question?" Luke said one night, entering her room. "Of course, dear. What is it?" "How did you know you had forgiven your father for abandoning you and Grandma Aggie?" The question took Nancy by surprise. The boys knew the story. She had never hidden it, but no one had brought it up in years. "Why are you asking that?" "Because there's a girl at school whose father abandoned her family, and she keeps saying she'll hate him forever. But I think that makes her sad all the time. And I kept wondering if it's ever possible to forgive something like that." Nancy thought carefully about her answer. "You know, Luke, I don't know if I've completely forgiven. I think forgiveness isn't something that happens all at once. It's a process. There are days when I still get angry about what my father did, but I learned that carrying anger doesn't hurt him, it hurts me. So I choose, every day, to let that weight be a little lighter. Not for him, for me. And what if we can never forgive? Then you learn to live with it. You find a way to be happy despite what hurt you. You build new things instead of staring at what was destroyed. Is that what you did? Built new things? Yes. I built this crazy family we have. I reunited with my son. I gained all of you. Every good thing was a way of telling that man who abandoned me, you didn't defeat me. You didn't define my life. I did." Luke hugged Nancy. "I hope I can be that strong when I grow up." "You're already strong, you just don't know it yet." The years kept passing. The triplets kept growing, each developing their own personality. Michael became studious and quiet, always with his head in a book. David was the athlete, always playing soccer with his friends. Luke was the artist, compulsively painting and drawing. Hannah grew up as a mix of them all, sweet but determined, quiet but observant. The house that had been the stage for so much chaos years earlier was now a space of harmony. There were still arguments, of course. There were still difficult days. But there was also unconditional love, mutual respect, and the certainty that these people were together by choice, not obligation. One Sunday afternoon, when everyone was gathered for the weekly lunch, including Robert and his family, Richard made an announcement. "I'd like to propose a toast. Today marks 10 years since Nancy came to this house as a cleaner and changed everything." Everyone raised their glasses. 10 years, Richard continued. "It seems impossible that so much time has passed, and at the same time it feels like she's always been here. Nancy, you saved my children. You saved me. You saved this family in ways I didn't even know needed saving. And now look at what we've built together." "We love you, Aunt Nancy," shouted the triplets. "I love Grandma Nancy," added Hannah in her small voice. "Thank you, Mom, for everything," said Robert, emotional. Nancy looked around the table. She saw faces she loved, each representing part of the unlikely journey she had lived. She never could have imagined that morning 10 years ago when she accepted a cleaning job, that she would end up here, with a huge family, with renewed purpose, with a happy ending that seemed impossible. "I'm the one who should thank you," she managed to say, her voice choked. "You gave me back my life. You showed me it's never too late to start over. To be loved. To love." "Now let's eat before the food gets cold," interrupted Melissa, breaking the emotional moment with practicality. Everyone laughed and served themselves. The table was abundant, the conversation lively, love tangible in the air. After lunch, when the younger ones went to play in the backyard and the adults stayed talking in the living room, Nancy allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought about Faith, whom she never met, but who somehow brought her to that house. She thought about Mrs. Agnes, whose wisdom still guided her even after 4 years of absence. She thought about the son she gave up for adoption, who had returned to her when she needed him most. And she thought about those 3 impossible boys that no nanny could handle, the same boys who were now responsible teenagers, dedicated students, loving sons. Life had a strange way of unfolding. You plan one thing, and it gives you something completely different. And sometimes, if you're lucky, what you get is even better than what you planned. Nancy smiled to herself. Yes, she had been lucky. Much more than she deserved. And I was going to cherish every moment of it. A few more years flew by quickly. The triplets were now 17 years old. They were in their final year of high school, thinking about colleges, futures, independent lives. The idea of them leaving home soon was both exciting and painful for the whole family. One night, Michael started a conversation with Nancy that she never expected to have. "Aunt Nancy, can I tell you something?" "Always." The boys and I were talking. About our mother. Faith. And? We remember her, you know. Not everything, of course. We were too little. But there are some flashes. The smell of her hair, the way she laughed, the song she used to sing. That's good. It's important to hold on to those memories. But the truth is, you've been more of a mother to us than she had time to be. And we know that might sound wrong to say, like we're betraying her memory, but it's the truth. Nancy felt her eyes fill with tears. "Michael, honey, you're not betraying anyone. What your mother wanted most was for you to be happy, for you to have someone to take care of you. And if I've managed to be that person, then I'm honoring her, not replacing her. We wanted to know if you would accept if we called you Mom, not just among ourselves, but publicly, because that's what you are." "And what about Melissa?" "Melissa is our stepmother. We love her. But it's not the same. With you, it's different. You were there when we were destroying everything, when we were at our worst. And you didn't give up. You taught us how to be people again." Nancy couldn't answer with words. She just hugged Michael and let the tears fall freely. "Of course I accept. It would be the greatest honor of my life." When they told Richard and Melissa, both were emotional but fully supportive. "You know," Richard said, "I always knew that's what Nancy meant to you. I was just waiting for you to realize it too." On that Mother's Day, 3 weeks later, the triplets organized a surprise. They made a photo album with moments from the last 10 years. Each photo had a handwritten caption about what that moment meant. "The day you arrived and sang for the first time. When you taught me how to tie my shoes. The first time we managed to have dinner without a mess. When you stayed up all night because I had a fever. The day of the school presentation you didn't miss. All the bedtime stories. Every hug when we were sad." The last page had a photo of everyone together, taken the previous Sunday, and the caption simply said, "To the best mom we could have asked for. We love you endlessly. Michael, David, and Luke." Nancy held the album to her chest and cried like she hadn't cried in years. They were tears of pure happiness, of fulfillment, of a circle closing in the most beautiful way possible. Time continued its relentless march. The triplets graduated from high school with honors. Michael won a scholarship to study medicine. David was accepted into a physical education program in another city. Luke decided to study art at a local college. Graduation day was bittersweet. Immense pride mixed with the nostalgia of seeing those boys become men. "I still remember when I couldn't get you to sit still for 5 minutes," Nancy commented, adjusting Michael's tie before the ceremony. "And now look at you, so grown up, so responsible." "It's your fault," David joked. "If you hadn't shown up singing that day, we'd probably be in a correctional school." Everyone laughed, but there was truth in that joke. During the ceremony, when they called the graduates' names, the three went up on stage together. They had requested special permission for this, and instead of just taking their diplomas, they asked for the microphone. "We want to thank a few people," Michael began. "Our father, Richard, who even in the toughest times never gave up on us. Melissa, who accepted 3 complicated teenagers as part of her life. And especially Nancy, our heart mother, who taught us that family is about love, not genetics." The entire auditorium applauded. Nancy, sitting in the audience next to Richard and Melissa, cried without caring who saw. The college years were transformative. The boys would leave home but always came back. They called constantly, they shared victories and defeats, and Nancy was always there, offering advice, sending food, giving the necessary emotional support. Hannah grew up seeing all this. At 12, she perfectly understood the unique dynamic of that family. She knew that Aunt Nancy wasn't a real aunt, but was more than that. She knew the brothers had lost their mother, but had gained 2 other maternal figures. She knew family could take many forms and all were valid. Robert remained a constant presence, his own children now teenagers too. The extended family gathered every Sunday, a tradition no one dared break. Nancy, now 70, remained active and healthy. She still cared for Hannah when needed. She still cooked for everyone. She still sang the same old songs, but now with the added wisdom of someone who had lived a lot and seen her choices bear beautiful fruit. On one of those Sundays, Richard asked to speak. "I want to make an important announcement. After years of working, I've decided to retire and pass the factory to other managers. I want more time to live, to enjoy the family while I can." "Daddy, are you sure?" asked Luke. "Absolutely. The company is solid, profitable, in good hands. I've done my part. Now I want to travel with Melissa, see the world, do things I've always put off." "What about me and Hannah?" the girl joked. "You'll come along on some trips. And on the others, Aunt Nancy will take care of you as she always has." "Actually," Nancy intervened, "I'm also thinking of slowing down. I'm 70. I think I deserve some rest too." "You'll never rest completely," said Robert, knowing his mother, "but I agree you deserve more time for yourself." It was decided then that Nancy would stop doing the heavier work. She wouldn't care for the children full-time anymore. She'd be available when needed, but would have more free time for herself, to travel, to do things she had put off her whole life. And for the first time in decades, Nancy allowed herself to think of herself. She started taking painting classes, something she had always wanted but never had time for. She joined a book club. She traveled to see the ocean, which she had only seen once in her life. Life had an interesting way of compensating. She had spent 40 years giving of herself to others. Now she had a decade, maybe 2 if health allowed, to receive back. Michael graduated from medical school and decided to specialize in pediatrics. It was no coincidence. He wanted to work with children, help them the way Nancy had helped him and his brothers. David became a physical education teacher, finding purpose in teaching young people about discipline and overcoming. Luke opened a small art studio where he gave classes to underprivileged children. He said he wanted to give them a way to express their pain, just as he had had. The 3 had absorbed Nancy's lessons and were multiplying her impact on the world. At a Sunday lunch years later, the family was gathered as always. But now it had grown even more. Michael had married and brought his wife. David had a serious girlfriend. Luke was single but happy. Hannah, now 17, was finishing high school. Amy and Peter, Robert's children, were already in college. Tyler was in high school. It was a huge table, full of voices, laughter, discussions, love. Nancy, at 75 years old, watched everything with deep contentment. Her hair was completely white now. Her skin had more wrinkles. Her movements were slower. But her spirit remained vibrant. "What are you thinking about?" asked Melissa, sitting beside her. "I'm thinking that if someone had told me 20 years ago that my life would be this, I wouldn't have believed it. You deserve all of this." "I don't know if I deserve it, but I'm grateful. Every day I'm grateful. You saved this family, Nancy. Never forget that. And this family saved me back." It was a fair exchange. When lunch ended and everyone was helping to clean up, the triplets, who weren't so triple anymore, each with their own lives, their appearances differentiated by age and experiences, asked for attention. "We have something to give to Mom," announced Michael. "Mom Nancy," clarified David, because now there were 2 mothers and he needed to specify. "We've been doing some research," explained Luke, "about adult adoption." Nancy looked confused. "Adult adoption? It's possible to adopt someone even after they're an adult. It's a legal process that recognizes a bond that already exists. And we wanted to know if you would accept being our mother not just in heart, but legally too." The silence that followed was profound. Everyone in the room was holding their breath. You want to adopt me?" "The 3 of us. We want you to be officially our mother, for your name to appear on our documents. for there to be no more of this mother-in-heart thing. Just mother, period. But Faith, you already have a mother. We have two, corrected Michael. One who gave us life, another who taught us how to live, and we want to honor both. But the legal one, the one we can make official, is you. Nancy looked at Richard. And you? What do you think about this? I think it's perfect. I think it should have been done years ago. You are their mother in every way that matters. Let it be in law, too. Nancy couldn't hold back the tears. At 75 years old, she was finally going to have children legally. Not one, but 3 at once. Yes, she managed to say between sobs. Yes, 1,000 times, yes. The room erupted in applause and hugs. Even Melissa was crying, happy that this family was finally officially recognizing what everyone had known for years. The legal process took a few months. There was paperwork to fill out, hearings to attend, documents to authenticate. But finally, on an autumn day, the judge banged the gavel and declared Michael, David, and Luke Parker Smith officially the children of Nancy Smith. Congratulations, said the judge, smiling. I rarely see an adult adoption case with such a beautiful story behind it. May you continue to be this united family. When they left the courthouse, Nancy held the new documents as if they were the greatest treasure in the world, and to her they were. Mum, called Michael, testing the word officially for the first time. Shall we celebrate? Let's. But at home. With everyone. The right way. The celebration at home was emotional. Robert was there with his whole family. Hannah helped prepare a huge cake. Melissa organized decorations. Richard did his best to cook something special, even though his cooking skills were still limited. Today is a historic day, declared Robert, raising a glass. My mother waited 40 years to find me again, and now 25 years later, she officially gains 3 more children. This shows that it's never too late for family to grow, for love to multiply, for the right things to happen. Grandma Aggie would be so happy, commented Hannah, with the wisdom of someone who had grown up hearing stories about the great-grandmother she never knew. She is happy, corrected Nancy. Wherever she is happy. I'm sure of it. The following months were an adjustment to this new official reality. The triplets changed their documents, adding Smith to the Parker surname. Now they were Michael Parker Smith, David Parker Smith, and Luke Parker Smith. Small changes on paper that represented enormous transformations in the heart. But life, as always, had more twists in store. Richard began having health problems. Nothing serious at first, just a persistent fatigue he attributed to age. But when he started having dizziness and shortness of breath, Melissa insisted he see a doctor. The tests revealed a heart problem. It wasn't terminal, it wasn't immediate, but it was serious. He would need surgery, care, significant lifestyle changes. How long do I have to wait for the surgery? Richard asked the cardiologist. I recommend within the next 6 weeks. It's a complex surgery, but necessary. If we wait too long, the risk increases considerably. The news shook the whole family. The triplets, even as adults, felt the fear of losing their father. Hannah panicked. Melissa tried to be strong, but was visibly frightened. Nancy took on the role of emotional pillar for everyone. She who had faced so many losses, so many fears, now had the necessary experience to guide others through this storm. Everything will be all right, she repeated whenever someone panicked. He's strong, has good doctors, and has all of us rooting for him. And what if it's not all right? Hannah asked one night, hugging Nancy. What if I lose my father like the boys lost their mother? Then you'll suffer. It will hurt, but you'll survive, because you have an entire family around you who won't let you sink, just like they didn't let your brothers sink. In the weeks leading up to the surgery, Richard put all his affairs in order. He updated his will, organized company documents, had serious conversations with each of his children. With Michael, he spoke about responsibility and how proud he was that he had become a doctor. With David, he talked about passion and how important it was to do what you love, not what made more money. With Luke, he discussed art and sensitivity and how the world needed people who saw beauty where others saw only chaos. With Hannah, the conversation was more difficult. She was the youngest, the one who had the least time with him, the one who would have the most to lose if something went wrong. "Daddy, I'm scared," she confessed. "Me too. But you know what helps me? Thinking about everything we've been through as a family. I lost faith, thought I would lose the boys to their destructive behavior, almost lost the company, faced 1,000 crises. And always we managed to overcome, because we have each other. But what if this time is different? Then you'll have your brothers, Melissa, and especially Nancy. You'll have an entire family that loves you more than anything. You'll never be alone." The day of the surgery arrived. The whole family went to the hospital. They occupied the entire waiting room, a large and noisy group that the hospital staff looked at with a mixture of curiosity and empathy. The surgery was scheduled to last 6 hours. They were the longest 6 hours of everyone's lives. Michael, using his medical knowledge, tried to explain each step of the procedure to calm the others, but even he was visibly nervous. David couldn't keep still, walking from one side of the room to the other. Luke was compulsively drawing in a notebook, trying to channel his anxiety. Hannah was clinging to Nancy, who was humming the same old song softly. Melissa was praying silently, her hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles were white. Robert had come with Jennifer to give support. Amy, Peter, and Tyler were also there, showing that this extended family was present in difficult times. When the surgeon finally came out of the operating room, everyone stood up in a synchronized movement. "The surgery was successful," he announced, and the relief was so palpable that several people began to cry. "He'll need to stay under observation in the ICU for a few days, then another week in the hospital. Full recovery will take months, but he'll be fine." Melissa collapsed into a chair, crying with relief. The triplets hugged each other. Hannah ran into Nancy's arms. Robert squeezed the surgeon's hand gratefully. "Can I see him?" asked Melissa. "In a few hours when he's more stable. For now, I recommend you all go home and rest. It's going to be a long recovery. You'll need energy." But nobody went home. Everyone stayed there, waiting, until they could see Richard for a few minutes. He was pale, with tubes and monitors everywhere, but he was alive, he was breathing, he was fighting. In the following days, the family organized shifts to visit Richard in the hospital. There was always someone there, making sure he wasn't alone, that he had a familiar face when he woke up. Nancy spent hours sitting by his bedside, telling stories, singing songs, doing the same thing she had done with the triplets years ago when they needed calm and peace. "You came as a cleaner and became this family's guardian angel," commented a nurse who had heard the whole story. "I'm no angel. I'm just someone who was very lucky to find people who needed me as much as I needed them." Richard was discharged after 10 days. He returned home weak, needing constant care, but alive and grateful. The recovery was slow and frustrating. He, who had always been so active, so independent, now depended on others for simple tasks. But the family was there, each doing their part. Michael, with his medical knowledge, supervised medications and care. David helped with physical therapy at home, light exercises to regain strength. Luke kept his father entertained with conversations, movies, anything to keep him from getting depressed about the situation. Hannah read to him, kept him company, showing an affection that surprised everyone with its maturity. Melissa took care of the practical routine, making sure everything worked, and Nancy, as always, was everywhere at once, cooking healthy meals, remembering the medications, listening when Richard needed to vent about the frustration of being limited. "I don't know what would have become of me without you," he said one afternoon. "You'd be fine. You have a whole family taking care of you. But you're different. You're the foundation, the bedrock on which all this was built. If you hadn't shown up that day so many years ago." But I did, and I haven't regretted a single second since then. 3 months after the surgery, Richard was much better. He still had limitations, still needed care, but he was returning to himself. He made jokes, laughed easily, enjoyed every moment with a renewed awareness of how precious life is. It was during this recovery period that he had a revelation. You know," he said to Melissa one night, "I spent my whole life working, building the company my father left, thinking that was my mission. But nearly dying made me realize that my true mission was always something else." "What?" "Being a father, being a husband, being part of this crazy family. Work was just a means. Family was always the end. And what do you want to do with this revelation? I want to sell the company for good, not pass it to managers. Sell it completely. Use the money to secure everyone's future and to truly live the time I have left. Melissa reflected on this. If that's what you want, I support you. But are you sure? That company is your father's legacy. My father's legacy is the furniture we made, but my legacy is those 4 boys I raised and Hannah, and this family we built against all odds. This is worth more than any company. The decision was made. Richard sold the factory to a consortium that guaranteed to keep the employees and the quality. The amount was significant, enough to ensure the comfort of the entire family for generations. With his health stabilized and financial freedom secured, Richard and Melissa finally took the trips they had always postponed. They visited places that were just names on maps. They experienced different cultures. They lived experiences that enriched their lives. And always, always, they returned home eager. Because that's where their hearts were. The years kept passing. The triplets established themselves in their careers. Michael opened a pediatric clinic focused on serving children from low-income families. David became the principal of a school, implementing innovative sports programs. Luke gained recognition as an artist, with his works being exhibited in important galleries. All 3 got married at different times. They brought partners into the family who were welcomed with the same warmth that had always characterized that group. And then came the grandchildren. First from Michael, a boy named Gregory in honor of the baby that Nancy had given up for adoption decades before. Then from David, twins who inherited their father's energy. Finally from Luke, a quiet and observant girl who loved to draw. Nancy, now 80 years old, became a great-grandmother too. Robert's children had their own children. The family that began with a cleaner and 3 impossible boys now spanned 4 generations. The Sunday gatherings had to change locations. Richard's house, even though it was large, could no longer hold everyone. They rented spaces, had barbecues in parks, found creative ways to keep the tradition alive. Hannah graduated in psychology, specializing in childhood trauma. It was no coincidence. She had grown up watching her brothers process the loss of their mother and wanted to help other children do the same. "Everything I do," she said in an interview for a psychology magazine, "I learned by observing my family. I learned that pain doesn't have to destroy, that love can heal, that family is about choice and dedication, not genetics." The interview went viral. Hannah became an important voice in the field, giving lectures, writing articles, changing how people thought about childhood grief and non-traditional family structures. Nancy watched everything from afar, proud but not seeking credit. She never wanted fame or recognition. She just wanted to see the people she loved happy and fulfilled. But age was starting to take its toll. At 82, Nancy had a minor stroke. Nothing severe, but enough to scare everyone and limit some of her movements. The roles reversed. Now it was her children taking care, making sure she took her medicine, did physical therapy, and wasn't alone for long periods. "This is strange," she commented to Michael, who had come to visit her. "What?" "Being taken care of. I spent my whole life taking care of others, now being on the other side. It's the natural cycle of things, Mum. You took care of us, now we take care of you, it's fair. I don't feel old enough to need care. You're 82. You just had a stroke. I think that qualifies you to need care." Nancy laughed, but there was a sadness there. Independence had always been important to her. Losing that, even partially, was hard. Richard was aging too. At 78, the limitations of his operated heart were increasingly present. He and Nancy spent hours talking, reminiscing about the years they had shared. "Do you regret anything?" he asked in one of these conversations. "I regret taking so long to accept being happy. I carried so much guilt for so long about having given my son up for adoption. I wasted years punishing myself when I could have been living. But in the end, it worked out. It did. But it could have worked out sooner if I had allowed myself. And you, Richard? Any regrets?" "Many small ones. But the biggest was not realizing sooner that being present is worth more than any professional success. I missed important moments with the boys while I was working. I can't get that back. But you learned, and taught them that lesson. Look how they're present fathers to their own children. That's true. At least there was a purpose. Melissa, at 73, was still the most active of the trio. She organized everything, kept everyone connected, was the communication hub of the extended family. When I'm gone, Richard joked, you'll need a full-time assistant just to manage this family. When you're gone, I'll follow right after. I don't plan to stay here alone. You'll never be alone. You have Hannah, the boys, everyone, but it's not the same. We built this together. It makes sense to finish together too. They were morbid conversations on the surface, but honest. At their age, it was impossible not to think about the end. Nancy started writing, not a formal book, but memories, stories about her life, about the people she met, about the lessons she learned. She wanted to leave something tangible for her grandchildren and great-grandchildren so they would know who she was beyond the grandmother or great-grandmother. Robert helped with typing on days when her hand trembled too much. He read aloud what she dictated, making corrections when necessary, adding his own comments and memories. Mom, you should publish this. It's an amazing story. It's not for publishing, it's for family. But other families could benefit. See that it's not just them going through difficulties, that there's always hope. Nancy thought about that. Maybe Robert was right. Maybe her story could help someone. In the end, they decided to do a small edition, just for family and close friends. Memories of a Cleaner Who Found a Family was the simple but direct title. The launch was on a Saturday afternoon at Richard's house. Everyone was there. Nancy autographed each copy personally, writing unique messages for each person. For the triplets, she wrote, "You taught me that it's never too late to start over. Thank you for choosing me as your mother." For Robert, 40 years of waiting were worth it. You are my pride. For Hannah, you grew up seeing the best and worst of this family. Use that to help the world. For Richard and Melissa, thank you for opening the door that day. You changed my life. For the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, may you always remember family isn't just blood. It's love, it's choice, it's presence. It was a perfect afternoon, full of emotion, laughter, shared stories, a celebration not just of the book, but of everything that family represented. 2 years later, Richard had a heart relapse. This time, it was quick. There was no time for surgery, for prolonged hospitalization. He was at home, surrounded by family, when his heart simply stopped. The pain was intense. But unlike when Faith passed, now there was a structure to deal with the loss. There were open conversations about feelings. There was emotional support from all sides. There was the certainty that Richard had lived well, had loved deeply, had left a beautiful legacy. The funeral was well attended, not just family but former factory employees, community people, lives he had touched over the years. The triplets gave the speech together, taking turns with paragraphs as they did in everything. Our father taught us that being present is the greatest gift we can give to those we love, Michael began. He taught that it doesn't matter how many times you fall, it matters how many times you get up, David continued. And he taught us that family is what we build together day after day with love and dedication, Luke concluded. Nancy held Melissa throughout the entire funeral. The two had become true friends over the years, and now shared the pain of losing the man they loved. I always knew he would go first, Melissa said that evening. His heart was always weaker, but even knowing I wasn't prepared. No one ever is, Nancy replied. But we survive, because he would want us to. The following months were about adjustment. Melissa stayed in the house where she had lived with Richard for so many years, but it was hard being there without him. Every corner held a memory, every object told a story. Hannah moved back home to keep her mother company. She was between relationships and thought it would be good for both of them. Nancy visited almost every day. She and Melissa cooked together, watched movies, talked about Richard and about life. "Do you think he knew?" Melissa asked one afternoon. "Knew what?" "How much he changed our lives, how important he was." I think so. In the conversations we had before he passed, he talked a lot about that, about being proud of what we built as a family. I hope so. I hope he went in peace. 2 years after Richard, it was Nancy's turn to start declining. It wasn't dramatic, just a progressive tiredness, her body finally collecting the price of 86 well-lived years. She didn't want to die in a hospital. She wanted to be at home, surrounded by family. Her children arranged everything to make that possible. A hospital bed was set up in the living room. There was always someone with her. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren came to visit, bringing drawings, flowers, stories. Robert spent entire nights sitting by the bed holding the hand of the mother he had found so late but loved so deeply. The triplets took turns with her care, each contributing their skills. Michael, with his medical knowledge, David with physical strength to help with movements, Luke with art and music to keep her spirits high. Hannah read to her, the same stories that Mrs. Agnes used to tell, keeping the tradition alive. Melissa was there every day, a constant and comforting presence. On a spring afternoon with all the windows open and the sound of birds coming into the house, Nancy called everyone close. "I don't want you to be sad when I'm gone," she said, her voice weak but determined. "I had a life much better than I deserved. I met you all, I was loved, I loved. What more could anyone ask for?" "Mom, don't talk like that," Michael pleaded, holding her hand. "I need to speak. I need you to understand that it's okay. I lived fully. I saw my children grow up, become amazing people. I met my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. I was part of something bigger than myself. I am at peace." "What do we do without you?" David asked, his voice choked. "You go on, you live, you love, you build. You do everything I learned from you and you learned from me. But most importantly, you take care of each other. This family is special. Keep it that way." Robert came closer. "Mom, forgive me for taking 40 years to look for you." "Son, there's nothing to forgive. The time we had was perfect. Every moment was worth the wait. I love you. I love you too. And I love all of you, each one in a unique and special way." She looked around the room, full of beloved faces, and smiled. "You gave me everything, absolutely everything I needed. I'm the luckiest woman in the world." "We're the lucky ones," Luke said, "to have had you in our lives." Nancy closed her eyes, still smiling, and so, surrounded by love, she passed. Her funeral was a celebration of her life. There was no excessive sadness because she had asked there not to be. There was music, the songs she used to sing. There were stories, each person sharing their favorite memories. There was laughter through tears, because that's how Nancy would have wanted it. Michael told about how she showed up singing when they were impossible, and how that song changed everything. David spoke about the lessons of patience and persistence she taught. Luke shared how she had shown that it was possible to find beauty even in the most difficult moments. Robert honored the mother he had searched for so long, and who, when found, was everything he expected and more. Hannah read a poem she had written about a woman who came to clean a house and ended up cleaning broken hearts. And Melissa, the last to speak, said simply, "Nancy taught me that family isn't about who was there at the beginning, but about who stays for the journey. She stayed, and because of that, we are all better." In the months that followed, the family adjusted to Nancy's absence. It was strange not having her there, not hearing her voice, not receiving her advice. But her spirit remained in everything she had built. The triplets created a foundation in her name, focused on helping families in transition, grieving children, and caregivers who needed support. Everything Nancy would have supported. Robert compiled her memories along with his own, and published an expanded edition of the book. This time it was widely distributed. The story of the cleaner who saved the impossible triplets touched thousands of people. Hannah used her own family's story as a basis to develop new family therapy protocols, helping professionals better understand non-traditional structures. Melissa continued being the organizational center of the family, keeping everyone connected, ensuring traditions continued. The grandchildren and great-grandchildren grew up hearing stories about great-grandmother Nancy, about how she transformed a house in chaos into a home full of love. 10 years after Nancy's departure, the family gathered for a special event. It was the 50th anniversary of that day when she showed up to clean and changed everything. The reunion took place in the house that had been Richard and Melissa's, now belonging to Hannah. All generations were present. It was impossible to even count how many people were there. Michael, now in his 60s, looked around and got emotional. "Do you realize what she created?" he said to his brothers. "Look how many people are here because of that morning 50 years ago." "It wasn't just her," corrected David. "It was her and Dad, and Melissa, and Grandma Aggie, and Robert. It was all of us, building together." "But she was the catalyst," insisted Luke. "She was the spark that started it all." "Then let's make a toast," suggested Hannah, raising a glass. "To Nancy, the woman who taught us that family is about unconditional love and constant presence." "To Nancy!" echoed the entire room, and as they toasted, as they talked, as they laughed and cried and shared memories, it became clear that Nancy's legacy was alive. Not in monuments or plaques, but in every person in that room, in every act of kindness, in every moment of patience, in every comforting hug. The humble cleaner who came to clean a house had, unknowingly, cleaned much more than dirt. She had cleaned pain, anger, loneliness, and in the space that remained, she had planted love. Love that grew, multiplied, and spread through generations. And perhaps that is the true definition of family. Not who shares your blood, but who chooses to stay when everything is difficult, who sings when you need calm, who transforms chaos into home, who loves you not despite your flaws, but including them. Nancy had been all that and more, and even though she was no longer physically present, she would remain forever in the heart of every person whose life she touched. On the living room wall, there was a framed photo. It was the day the triplets turned 6, the first birthday party after Nancy entered their lives. In the photo, 5 smiling faces, Richard, the 3 boys, and Nancy in the center, hugging everyone with that smile that lit up any room. Underneath the photo, a simple plaque. "Family isn't about blood, it's about who's willing to bleed for you. With eternal love, Nancy Smith, 1940-2026. And it was true. Every word. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. Wasn't it moving to see how love and persistence transformed lives? Leave in the comments what touched you the most. And of course, if you liked the story, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories like this one.